What if I told you that America once promised death by electricity would be painless, modern, even humane, yet the very first man to ride the chair burst into smoke and flames while doctors watched, aghast? Auburn Prison, New York, dawn, August 6, 1890. In a narrow brick execution room, reporters jostle notebooks. Prison guards wipe sweat from iron restraints. At the center sits a throne-like oak chair, studded with copper electrodes and still glistening with fresh varnish. They strap down William Kemmler, convicted axe murderer. A black mask slips over his face. Current on. 700 volts roar through his body, sparks fly, his flesh sizzles. He convulses, then slumps, still alive. More power, a second jolt, 1030 volts, turns the room into an abattoir of charred flesh and sulfuric stench. Witnesses vomit. A reporter faints. The promised, clean, scientific death becomes a public horror show that headlines call an unspeakable scene of brutality. Why invent such a machine? By the 1880s, America's hangmen were botching nooses. Reformers wanted a modern solution. Enter the War of the Currents, Thomas Edison, direct current, versus George Westinghouse, alternating current. Edison's PR team pushed the chair, hoping to smear AC as deadly. The New York legislature bought the pitch. Thus, electricity, symbol of progress, became an instrument of state killing. You think the needle is humane? Wait until you feel 2,300 volts tear through bone. As you watch, ask yourself, if the state promised you a cleaner death but strapped you into this sizzling throne instead, would you still call it justice? Comment below, and around the 4-minute mark, we'll pause for a quick poll. Old Sparky goes national. 1924, Georgia State Prison, Milledgeville. The walls are thick, the floors were slick with age and sweat. In the corner of the chamber stands a dark wooden chair, ominous, permanent, cold. Its nickname? Old Sparky. But to some in Georgia, it had another name, Bloody 8-Ball. Because once you sit in it, your life was over before the ball stopped spinning. The spread of electricity as death. After Kemmler's horrific electrocution in 1890, the world watched in horror. But in America, the states leaned in. By the 1920s, over 25 states had adopted the electric chair, including Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas. It was marketed as quick, clinical, and more civilized than hanging, but the truth was anything but botched electrocutions. Let's talk numbers. Between 1890 and 2010, the U.S. carried out over 4,300 electrocutions. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, 1 in every 20 resulted in flames erupting from the condemned's head, prolonged convulsions lasting up to 10 minutes, chairs catching on fire, prisoners being shocked multiple times before death. In 1983, John Evans in Alabama was electrocuted 3 times over 14 minutes. Witnesses described smoke and fire erupting from his leg and face. His body jerked, spasmed, and his chest heaved after the first shock. A second and third shock were required to finally kill him. The room reeked of burning meat. Why did states continue? Because fire was better than a gallows misfire. Because electricity felt like science, not cruelty. Because it was out of public view. Unlike lynchings, unlike public hangings, the chair let the state kill behind closed doors. And Americans could go on pretending it was neat, humane, even righteous. Georgia's electric chair was infamous. Over the decades, dozens of African American men were electrocuted, many for alleged crimes with questionable evidence. The chair became a tool of racial control, quick publicized deaths that warned others not to challenge the system. From 1924 to 1972, Georgia executed over 300 people by electric chair. One of the most gruesome examples, in 1945, 15-year-old George Stinney Jr. was convicted and executed in South Carolina just 84 days after his arrest. He was too short for the chair. They stacked books under him so the electrodes could reach. 70 years later, his conviction was thrown out. Let's pause for a second. What do you think? Was the electric chair a step forward from hanging, or something even worse? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're finding this episode eye-opening, don't forget to hit subscribe. These stories aren't taught in classrooms, but they deserve to be remembered. Executioners were often prison employees, not professionals. They were janitors, guards, cooks, turned into executioners overnight. Some developed PTSD, others turned to alcohol. A few took their own lives. Because watching a man burn in front of you and then punching the time clock is not something the human mind handles well. The CIA's black chairs, torture in the shadows after September 11th. Undisclosed location somewhere in Eastern Europe. A single flickering bulb, no windows, no clocks. Just concrete walls and the sound of dripping water. In the center of the room is a chair, not the polished oak throne of American prisons, but a metal frame bolted to the ground, crude restraints welded onto the arms and legs. A man is dragged in, hooded, cuffed. He is told to sit. Then he hears the generator kick on, and the real pain begins. After September 11th, the United States launched its War on Terror, and with it came a secret war on the human body. The CIA began operating black sites, hidden detention centers in countries like Poland, Romania, and Thailand, where suspected terrorists were held without charges, without trial, without rights. Officially, the U.S. denied using torture. But reports from Human Rights Watch, leaked memos, and declassified Senate documents tell a different story. One that involves improvised electric chairs used not for execution, but for pain. In a 2016 Human Rights Watch report, multiple former detainees described being strapped to a chair, hooded or blindfolded, electrically shocked on hands, feet, and genitals, threatened with death by electrocution. Some were shocked until they urinated or defecated themselves. Others say they passed out, only to be revived and shocked again. One detainee said, "It felt like fire inside my bones, but there were no burns, only pain." The CIA didn't call it torture. They called it enhanced interrogation. But make no mistake, these chairs were the descendants of Old Sparky, not for execution, but for obedience. The Bush administration approved torture techniques through secret memos authored by lawyers in the Department of Justice. These torture memos argued that unless pain caused organ failure or death, it wasn't legally torture. This legal logic opened the door to electric shocks, forced standing, waterboarding, and sleep deprivation. And guess what? Congress didn't know. The public didn't know. Even some U.S. allies didn't know. Until whistleblowers and investigators forced the truth into daylight. Imagine being kidnapped, not arrested, disappeared, taken to a country you've never seen, strapped to a chair, shocked until your body betrays you, and told, "You can leave once you confess." Would you break? Would anyone hold your torturer accountable? Let us know in the comments below. And if this chapter unsettled you, good. That's where change begins. Many of these men were never charged. Some were found innocent and released years later. But they carry permanent scars, chronic nerve damage, PTSD, nightmares, social isolation. They returned home labeled terrorists, even though they were never tried. Their lives were shattered by a chair that left no smoke, only silence, electrified in front of God and everyone. Florida State Prison, 1997. A live news feed hovers outside a fortress of concrete and razor wire. Reporters pace, protesters chant, helicopters circle overhead. Inside, just beyond the media frenzy, Pedro Medina is strapped into Florida's electric chair. It's his execution day. What happens next shocks the world. As the current surges through Medina's body, flames erupt from his head. Smoke pours from under the leather mask. Witnesses gasp. Some weep. Others flee the room. But the switch stays on. The state insists the execution was successful. But the fireball tells a different story. By the 1980s and 1990s, the electric chair was no longer a mystery. It had been depicted in films, photographed in real prisons, even broadcast to the masses. In 1983, an ABC News camera was present for the botched execution of John Evans in Alabama, 3 jolts. 14 minutes. Flames, convulsions, screaming. A reporter who witnessed it called it the most awful thing I've ever seen. America watched and debated. Was this still justice, or had it become state-sponsored torture porn? In many states, governors refused to halt executions, even after repeated malfunctions. Why? Because the electric chair was no longer just about death. It was about political strength, public fear, and election wins. If you opposed it, you were called soft. If you supported it, you were tough on crime. So governors smiled for the cameras while men burned behind closed doors. What happens when a nation watches death on screen? Psychologists argue it desensitizes us. It blurs the line between justice and vengeance. It creates a culture where retribution feels righteous, even when it's horrific. It's not that we want them dead, one protester said. It's that we want to watch them die. And in the case of Pedro Medina, people did. Legacy of lightning. Why some still choose the chair today. Incredibly, the electric chair is still legal in some states, and some prisoners volunteer for it. Why? Because they fear the peaceful needle even more. Nashville, Tennessee, February 20th, 2020. A fluorescent hallway hums inside Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. Death row inmate Nicholas Todd Sutton, gray-haired, shackled, pauses before a heavy steel door. Warden Tony Mays asks the ritual question, "Method of execution?" Sutton's voice is steady, "Electrocution." Minutes later, he's strapped into Tennessee's century-old oak chair. At 7:26 p.m., a 1,750-volt jolt arcs through his body. Witnesses say his fists clenched, smoke curled from the headpiece, and the smell of burning leather filled the room. He is the 5th Tennessee inmate in 15 months to volunteer for the chair. Why would anyone choose that fate in 2020? 1. The humane illusion of lethal injection. Since the 1980s, lethal injection has marketed itself as silent, clinical, civilized. But a nationwide shortage of execution drugs and a string of botched injections lasting 20, 30, even 45 minutes has shattered that illusion. Prisoners now fear midazolam paralysis, awake but unable to scream. Pulmonary edema, drowning in their own fluids. Fourth failure, needles blown through scarred veins. Faced with that nightmare, some inmates view 2,000 volts as the quicker devil. "I'd rather feel electricity for a second," said one condemned man, "than suffocate for 10. Second states keeping the switch alive, state-by-state status of the electric chair. Tennessee, permitted as an alternative if lethal injection, drugs are unavailable, or if the inmate selects it. South Carolina. A 2021 law designates the electric chair as the primary method when lethal drugs are not accessible. Firing squad is also an option. Alabama, Florida, Virginia. The electric chair remains legally authorized. Inmates can choose it voluntarily. Note, Virginia abolished the death penalty in 2021, though its laws previously allowed the chair. Public backlash has been fierce. South Carolina's High Court only upheld the electric chair in 2023, over dissent calling it cruel and unusual. 3. The prisoner's calculation. Pros from the inmate's view. Speed and certainty. Heart stopped within seconds. No IV mishaps. Control. Choosing the chair feels like reclaiming a sliver of agency. No chemical paradox. Fewer unknowns about pain than experimental drug cocktails. Cons. Spectacle, flames, smoke, involuntary movements. Historical stigma, symbol of Jim Crow era, racism, and past botches. Family trauma, loved ones must imagine or sometimes witness the violence. For Sutton, Zagorski, and Lee Hall, the math was simple. Visible fire beats, invisible suffocation. 4. Executioners and technicians. The 21st century burden. Modern logistics teams must test saline-soaked sponges, too dry dust fireball, too wet, partial circuit. Electrode salt mixture to lower skin resistance. Exact current, 1,750 volts for 20 seconds. Drop to 240 volts for 100 seconds. Repeat. One Tennessee technician confided anonymously, "You pray the sponge thickness is right. If it's off, the head ignites. You never forget that smell." Some staff seek counseling, others resign. 5. Public opinion, a nation split by voltage. A 2023 Gallup survey found 55% of Americans still favor the death penalty in some form, yet only 14% prefer the electric chair over injection or firing squad. Why the gap? Visibility equals discomfort. We'll tolerate death if it looks like sleep. Media memory. Fireballs, like Pedro Medina's 1997 execution replay endlessly on YouTube. Racial history. The chair evokes images of disproportionately black bodies strapped down in Jim Crow states. But supporters argue it's fast, it's proven, and the condemned know what's coming. You've heard the statistics. You've felt the current. If you were facing execution, needle, gas, bullet, or chair, which would you choose and why? 6. Legacy and reflection. From William Kemmler's fiery 1890 debut to Nicholas Sutton's smoky exit in 2020, the electric chair has shocked more than 4,400 people in the United States. It was sold as progress. It became spectacle. Today it survives as a grim fallback, proof the search for a humane execution is itself a contradiction. The opposite of humane killing, legal scholar Deborah Deno writes, is the illusion that such a thing exists. As lethal injection secrecy grows and drug shortages persist, some states eye the breaker switch again. Lightning, it seems. never goes fully dark. Thank you for braving this journey through vaults, politics, and the human psyche. If this deep dive sparked new thoughts, give us a thumbs up, subscribe for future untold histories, and share your perspective in the comments. Because silence keeps the current flowing. Stay curious, stay critical, and remember, justice without transparency is just darkness, lit only by the flash of a switch.